What if I told you this wildfire wasn't an accident? They all said it was just nature, a heat wave, bad luck, nothing more. But then a German shepherd dug up something in the ashes, something that wasn't supposed to be found, something that turned a natural disaster into a crime scene. A former Marine, a loyal dog, a burned forest, and a truth buried deeper than the fire itself. Because sometimes the real danger isn't the flames we see, it's the people who light them. Stay with this story until the end. You're about to witness a twist that even the fire couldn't erase. And if you believe the world still needs stories about courage, loyalty, and justice, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video. Your support helps this channel keep growing, and I truly appreciate every single one of you watching. Thank you, and let's begin. The summer heat had turned Pine Ridge, Oregon, into a dry and crackling wasteland. The town was small, surrounded by layered forests of pine and fir, usually green and alive, but now the trees stood brittle, coated in dust, as if waiting for a single spark to finish them. The sky that night was thick with smoke, glowing orange from a wildfire raging less than 2 miles away, sending ashes drifting like black snow over rooftops and abandoned porches. Sirens echoed through the valley, the kind that made people step outside in silence, not to help, but to stare. Most fires in this region were blamed on lightning or careless campers, but this one moved too fast, burned too evenly, spread too deliberately, like it had been planned, not born. Jack Turner tightened the straps of his backpack as he stood near the volunteer staging area. At 45, he looked like someone built from the same forest the fire was destroying. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a square jaw half hidden behind a trimmed beard peppered with gray, his tanned skin marked by old scars that suggested both war and wilderness. His short dark hair was uneven, cut by hand, and his eyes were deep-set, the color of burnt coal, always scanning, always calculating. A former Marine who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, Jack now lived alone in a small cabin outside town, preferring the company of quiet landscapes and of the one soul he trusted most, Rex. Rex, a German shepherd, 5 years old, strong-limbed, deep brown coat with a black saddle pattern, intelligent eyes, and ears always raised like radar. He wasn't just a pet. He was a trained search and rescue dog, disciplined, loyal, with every movement sharp and purposeful. The townspeople often joked that Rex seemed more alert than most humans in Pine Ridge, and they were right. If Jack was silent resilience, Rex was instinct sharpened into muscle and motion. The two of them joined the volunteer line, waiting for assignments. The air was hot enough to sting the throat. Jack wore cargo pants, a gray long-sleeve shirt rolled at the forearms, and a soot-marked backpack filled with first aid gear, rope, gloves, and 2 water canteens. Rex wore a simple harness with a small side pouch containing gauze, a collapsible bowl, and a GPS tag. A woman in a yellow firefighter jacket approached the group, her voice firm but strained. This was Sarah Collins, one of the few full-time firefighters in Pine Ridge. She was 38, tall and lean with long, tied-back copper hair, pale skin dotted with freckles, and green eyes that looked both tired and unbreakable. She carried herself like someone who had seen too many disasters and too few solutions. Her jaw was tense, and her tone carried authority sharpened by urgency. "We need volunteers on the West Line. We've got spot fires jumping the ridge. Anyone with rescue or tracking experience, step forward." Jack stepped forward. Rex followed, silent and alert. Sarah nodded at them, recognizing the pair. "Good. We'll need you both. The terrain's unstable. A few hikers were reported missing, but our priority is containment and clearing. Jack only replied with a short, "Understood." The fire spread like a beast with direction, not chaos. Jack noticed that before he even reached the ridge, flames didn't behave this uniformly unless fueled by something stronger than dry brush, but he said nothing. Not yet. Hours passed. Smoke clawed at the sky. Teams worked in rotations, cutting fire lines and hauling hoses. Jack and Rex moved beyond the perimeter, searching for signs of life or injury. The forest floor was layered in ash, still hot. Trees burned from the inside like lanterns. Rex froze. His body tensed, his nose lifted. Then he began digging into the ashes near a fallen log. Jack followed, crouching beside him. "What is it, boy?" Rex growled softly, not in fear but in recognition. This scent did not belong. Beneath the layer of burnt pine needles, Rex unearthed clumped ash mixed with something thick, almost melted, with a strange, oily residue. Jack touched it with a glove, raised it to his nose, and grimaced. Not natural. Accelerant. Civilian fires didn't burn this hot, this uniform, this fast. "Someone fed this fire," Jack muttered. Rex whined, stepping back as if refusing to touch the corrupted soil again. Jack looked around, not at the flames, but at the burn pattern. The trees nearest the ignition point hadn't fallen in random angles. They fell outward, like something had blasted them, not burned them. That meant the fire didn't crawl, it exploded outward. A voice echoed from behind. "Jack, you find something?" Sarah approached, breathing heavy, soot coating her face. Jack hesitated. He didn't want to accuse, not yet, not without proof, but he wasn't the kind of man to ignore a pattern. He lifted the ash-coated sample. "Rex picked this up. Smells like some kind of fuel additive. You ever see this in a wildfire?" Sarah looked at it, eyes narrowing. "Most fires here start from lightning strikes, campers, cigarettes. Not this." She didn't sound shocked. She sounded like she already suspected something, but hadn't dared say it aloud. Before Jack could continue, a sharp gust sent flames rolling closer. Sarah pointed back toward the trail. "We need to move. If you've got evidence, keep it. But don't stay here. This line's gonna collapse." Jack pocketed the sample, tapped Rex's harness, and moved. But as he retreated down the ridge, he couldn't shake the feeling that this fire wasn't just destruction. It was a message. And someone wanted land cleared fast. When they reached the base camp, volunteers talked like it was a tragic accident. Heat wave, dry season, bad luck. Jack listened quietly, but inside him something had already shifted. Fire didn't frighten him, but deliberate fire. Fire lit with intent, tied to greed, masked as nature. That was something else. That was war disguised as weather. Rex sat beside him, panting, ears still up, eyes fixated not on the flames, but on the ridge where he had found the chemical stain. Jack ran a hand over his fur. "You smelled it before I saw it," he whispered. Someone wanted this place to burn. He didn't know who yet, but he would. And Rex would lead him. Jack didn't sleep the night after the fire. The sample Rex found lay sealed inside a plastic evidence bag on his desk, a smudge of black and silver ash clinging to the inside like it still held heat. Morning brought no relief, only a gray sky and the sour smell of burnt lumber drifting through town. Jack's cabin stood far enough from the fire line to survive, but the forest beyond it was now a graveyard of smoking stumps. Rex paced the floor, restless, ears flicking at every distant sound, as if he expected danger to return any second. Jack finally sat down at his old laptop and typed an email to Emily Carter, attaching photos and requesting a full analysis. Emily was not just any lab technician. She was a forensic chemist specializing in combustion materials, and one of the few people Jack trusted. They had met during a joint military-civilian wildfire investigation in Colorado years ago. While Jack had been the field tracker, Emily had been the mind who saw truth in molecules and residue. She was precise, methodical, and quietly brilliant. 2 hours later, the phone rang. Emily's voice held urgency. "Jack, whatever you sent me, it's not campfire ash. This is industrial accelerant, high grade, designed to burn hotter and longer than gasoline." Jack leaned forward, jaw tightening. So it wasn't nature. Someone made this fire happen. Emily agreed. Not just made it happen, engineered it. Whoever burned that forest didn't want a fire. They wanted erasure. Before hanging up, she added, "I can run deeper lab work and send a full report, but this wasn't an accident, Jack. Be careful." Jack ended the call and stared out the window at the blackened tree line. Rex stepped beside him, watching too, fur bristled. "Yeah, I know," Jack muttered. "It's not just about land burning. There's a reason behind it." That afternoon, Jack took Rex back to the burned zone, this time starting farther north along the perimeter. The air was cooler, but the land was still dead. Charcoal soil, ghostly tree trunks, shattered stone from heat shock. Rex sniffed every few feet, not searching for people this time, but for patterns. Half an hour in, he alerted, ears up, low bark. Then he followed a direction sharply to the left. Jack followed through the ash until the ground changed. Instead of fire-scorched earth, there were tire tracks, deep and directional, belonging to a large vehicle, not an emergency truck. The pattern suggested a heavy four-wheel machine, probably with chemical tanks or cargo. Rex traced the path, nose low, tail rigid. The trail led to a clearing. There, the forest floor changed again. Not natural earth, but disturbed soil containing wooden survey stakes with fluorescent markings. Jack knelt to read one. Lot A, Phase 1. Another. Future Development Zone. Another. Commercial Sector Boundary. Someone had already prepared the land for transformation before the fire even finished burning. Jack stood slowly. This wasn't reckless destruction. It was strategy. A land wipe. Burn first, rebuild profit second. A voice cut through the silence. "You're not supposed to be here." Jack turned to see a man approaching from the tree line. Tall, mid-50s, wearing a reflective construction vest over a denim shirt, clipboard in hand, neat gray hair, and square glasses. His name tag read, Howard Blake, Land Surveyor. He looked like someone who had worked outdoors his whole life. Sun-leathered skin, calloused hands, a slight limp in his left leg. His expression wasn't hostile, but cautious, like a man who didn't want trouble but wouldn't run from it. Jack replied calmly, "Just walking my dog. Didn't realize the area was restricted." Howard exhaled, lowering the clipboard. "Technically not restricted yet. Won't be official until the paperwork clears." Jack raised a brow. "Paperwork? Already? Fire barely cooled." Howard hesitated, eyes flicking to the black horizon. Developers move fast, especially when land value drops overnight. There was something in his tone. Reluctance, maybe guilt. Jack tested him. "Seems a little convenient, don't you think? Fire clears land, then survey stakes show up the next day." Howard swallowed, jaw tight. "You didn't hear it from me, but things were being discussed weeks before the fire. I'm just paid to measure. I don't choose the jobs." Rex growled softly, reading tension before Jack did. Howard stepped back slightly, hands raised. "Look, I don't want trouble, but if I were you, I'd stop asking questions around here. People standing in the way of money don't stay standing long." Jack let Howard walk away, but every word stuck like a nail. Someone had started planning development before the fire, meaning the burn wasn't a response to disaster. It was step one. As Jack and Rex left the clearing, the dog caught another scent and pulled toward a patch of buried debris. Jack dug with his hands until he uncovered a melted metal drum, its label charred but partially readable. Combustion additive, industrial use only. Jack stared at it, pulse tightening. Proof. Real, physical proof. By sunset, he had photographs, samples, and coordinates logged. Someone wasn't just stealing land. They were covering tracks, burying evidence, betting on silence. But silence wasn't something Jack practiced anymore. Rex nudged his leg, waiting for the next move. Jack looked at the burned horizon and spoke into the wind. If they wanted no witnesses, they picked the wrong dog. Jack spent the next morning reviewing everything he had gathered. Photos of the melted chemical drum, the tire tracks, the survey stakes, and Emily's lab confirmation. The pieces were no longer scattered. They were forming a map, and every trail pointed upward, not to the workers or surveyors on the ground, but to someone with the power to sign approvals, shift zoning laws, and silence questions before they started. In Pine Ridge, that power had a name: Mayor Charles Milton. Milton was the kind of politician small towns liked, smiling, silver-haired, always ready with a handshake and a joke about bringing prosperity back to Pine Ridge. 53 years old, tall, fit in a way that suggested regular golf, but no real labor. He wore expensive suits that clashed with the town's flannel and denim population. His hair was perfectly combed, silver blending into black like a branding choice, and his smile was a salesman's smile. Wide, practiced, never reaching the eyes. His public persona was built on charm, but people who got too close discovered something colder. The kind of cold that could freeze a forest before burning it. Jack watched Milton's latest press conference on a muted TV at the diner in town. The mayor stood in front of a fire relief banner, speaking earnestly into cameras, calling the wildfire a tragic natural disaster, and promising swift rebuilding opportunities to create jobs and new tourism revenue. Jack didn't need the audio to feel the lie. Rex sat under the table, staring at the screen like even he recognized the scent of something rotten. Jack didn't approach Milton directly. He had learned long ago that people in power didn't confess when challenged. They crushed the challenger. Instead, he started tracing paper trails, visiting the county clerk's office under the guise of requesting fire safety reports. The clerk, a nervous man with thinning blonde hair and glasses too big for his face, reluctantly allowed Jack to browse public zoning logs. One document stood out: a land use approval signed by Mayor Milton 3 weeks before the fire, authorizing a private resort development on protected forest acreage, pending environmental clearance. The clearance now existed, burned into the soil. Jack scanned the signature, then took a photo. Hard evidence, not suspicion. That afternoon, Jack returned to the burn zone with Rex. The dog once again picked up a scent, not of fuel this time, but of metal and oil. He led Jack downhill toward a narrow creek that had turned black from ash runoff. There, half buried in mud and leaves, were 3 more chemical barrels, dented and scorched. Their labels were almost gone, but faint lettering remained. Hazardous, handle with PPE. They weren't meant for public eyes. Jack photographed everything, marking GPS coordinates. As he did, Rex growled low, not toward the barrels, but toward the trees behind them. Jack turned. A dark SUV was parked nearly invisible behind the brush, engine still ticking with warmth. Someone had been watching. Jack's pulse tightened. Someone had followed him out here. That night, as Jack returned home, he noticed something wrong before he even stepped onto the porch. Rex stopped, ears locked, tail stiff. Jack drew a flashlight and swept the doorframe. A single nail had been driven into the wood, holding a torn scrap of burned tree bark with one chilling message scratched in black marker. "Stop digging." Jack didn't move for a full 10 seconds. He wasn't dealing with amateurs anymore. Someone wanted him scared enough to walk away. They didn't know him at all. He took the note, dropped it into a bag. "They're watching us," he muttered to Rex. The dog didn't need the explanation. He was already pacing, nose high, protective instincts awake. Jack checked the locks, loaded a revolver he rarely touched, and sat in the dark with only the hum of the fridge and Rex's steady breathing beside him. He knew this pattern. He had seen it in war zones and cartel towns. Powerful men hiding behind hired hands, using threats first, violence second. And Pine Ridge was no longer a quiet American town. It was a battlefield in disguise. Jack whispered, more to himself than to Rex, "If Milton thinks he can scare me off, he'll learn something fast. I don't walk away. Not when they're burning truth to build profit." Rex rested his head on Jack's boot, eyes open, ears still raised. Jack looked into the darkness and felt the story harden into mission. Tomorrow, he wouldn't just follow the trail. He would confront the hunter. The knock didn't come with warning. It came with force. At 2:14 a.m., Jack jolted awake to the sound of splintering wood. Rex was already on his feet, teeth bared, a deep growl rising from his chest like thunder trapped in fur. Jack moved without hesitation, grabbing the backpack where he had already stored the chemical samples, printed documents, and the USB drive with Emily's lab report. He had expected intimidation, maybe surveillance. He hadn't expected a break-in this fast. Footsteps thudded inside the kitchen, more than one. Heavy boots, deliberate movement. Professionals, not drunks or vandals. Jack whispered, "Rex, stay low." The dog obeyed, muscles tensed like coiled rope. 3 men entered the hallway, faces masked, dressed in black tactical jackets. One carried a pistol with a mounted flashlight. Another held a crowbar. The third a duffel bag, clearly planning to search, take evidence, and disappear before sunrise. These weren't local thugs. They moved like men who had done this before. Jack slipped toward the back door, but the hinges screamed when he pushed it open. Flashlights swung, voices shouted, and suddenly the silent cabin became a battlefield. Jack shoved the backpack onto his shoulders and sprinted into the tree line. Rex stayed at his flank, paws slicing through dirt and pine needles. Behind them, a gunshot cracked the night, echoing through the forest like a signal flare. They were being chased. The forest was pitch black except for the moon cutting through branches, turning the ground into a shifting pattern of shadow and silver. Jack knew these woods better than the men behind him. He had walked every trail, memorized every fallen log and creek bend. But knowing the land didn't change the fact that the men behind him were armed and ordered to retrieve and erase. One of the men was faster than the rest. Jack heard him crashing through the trees, breath ragged but determined. Rex stopped, turned, and growled. Jack crouched behind a boulder, letting the man get closer. As the figure stepped into the moonlight, Jack saw him clearly. Early 40s, muscular build, shaved head, trimmed beard, sharp jawline, a long scar cutting across his neck. The look of someone shaped by violence and paid to repeat it. His gun scanned the dark, finger ready. That was all Rex needed. The German shepherd lunged from the side, full force, jaws locking onto the man's forearm just as he raised the gun. The attacker screamed, stumbled, and slammed against a tree, trying to shake Rex loose. Jack rushed forward, disarmed him with a strike to the wrist, then pinned him with a knee to the chest. The man gasped, fury behind his eyes. Jack pressed the gun against the man's own vest and said, "Names! Who sent you?" The man spat blood, refusing. Jack switched tactics. He pulled his phone, hit record, and spoke clearly. Armed intruder sent to retrieve evidence of arson linked to Mayor Charles Milton and private developers. State your employer. The man stiffened, not because of fear, but recognition. His eyes didn't say, "I don't know what you mean." They said, "You're already too close." Rex growled, teeth still sunk into the man's sleeve. The attacker finally spoke. "You don't understand who you're up against. Walk away, Turner, or this town won't be the only thing burned." Jack had the recording he needed. He signaled Rex to release, then backed away. The man didn't chase. He simply held his arm, staring like a predator denied a kill, because his orders hadn't been to hurt Jack. Not yet. His orders were to recover the evidence, and now they no longer had it. Jack moved deeper into the woods. He knew the men wouldn't stop. They would regroup, search, block exits, treat this as a hunt. He needed to reach higher ground, where the forest thinned and the fire roads led toward the old ranger tower. There, he could make a call, get backup, or at least visibility. Rex stayed close, silent now, waiting for commands. They were no longer witnesses. They were targets. At the ridge, Jack paused, breathing hard, then turned to look back. Flashlights flickered in the distance like angry stars, sweeping the forest in wide arcs. They were searching the way hunting dogs searched for wounded deer. Jack tightened the backpack straps and whispered, "They want the evidence. That means we keep it moving." Rex pressed against his leg in answer. The chase wasn't over, not even close, but the rules had changed. Jack wasn't running because he was afraid. He was running because he planned to turn around and strike back. Dawn came slowly over Pine Ridge, not with the soft glow of golden light, but with a gray haze that still carried the memory of fire. Jack and Rex reached the old ranger tower just as the first streak of daylight touched the valley. Jack used the elevated vantage point to transmit everything. Emily's chemical analysis report, photos of the buried barrels, the recorded confession, the zoning documents, and coordinates marked on a digital map. The files went to 3 places at once: local news outlets, a wildfire ethics organization, and the State Environmental Crimes Division. He didn't bother sending anything to the town sheriff. The sheriff answered to the mayor. Within hours, the quiet town was no longer quiet. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Journalists demanded statements. The words criminal arson, land grab, and developer conspiracy spread faster than the flames ever had. Mayor Charles Milton tried to appear calm as cameras turned on him, but his confident smile cracked along the edges. The silver-haired mayor who once spoke about reviving Pine Ridge now faced microphones like they were barrels of loaded guns. By afternoon, an emergency public hearing was held inside the town hall. Every seat was filled. Locals with ash-stained jackets, firefighters still smelling of smoke, elderly residents who remembered the forest before the drought, and people who had lost cabins, trails, or memories to the fire. Jack entered quietly through the back, Rex walking beside him with the composed posture of a trained protector. Even in a crowded room, the dog commanded attention. His coat still dusty, his eyes sharp, standing like a soldier who had earned the right to be there. The moderator called Jack forward. Some people in the room had known him for years, others only by rumor. The quiet ex-Marine who lived near the ridge, the man who preferred dogs over conversation. But when Jack spoke, the room listened. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He projected documents onto the screen, aerial photos of burn patterns, the accelerant lab results labeled with Emily Carter's credentials, the time-stamped recording of the armed intruder, the buried drums near the creek, and finally, the zoning approval signed by Milton weeks before the fire began. Gasps rippled through the room. Milton stood up, face flushed, hands trembling as he tried to defend himself. "This is taken out of context. You don't understand the full picture. That fire was—" Jack interrupted him with a single sentence. The fire wasn't an accident. It was a business investment. Silence fell like snowfall. State investigators entered then. 2 officials in gray suits, one of them a stern, middle-aged woman with tightly braided dark hair, angular cheekbones, and a badge clipped to her belt. Agent Valerie Knox, Environmental Crimes Division. Her expression was unreadable, the kind worn by people who had arrested more politicians than criminals. She approached the front, her voice cool and precise. "Mayor Charles Milton, you are under investigation for conspiracy to commit arson, environmental destruction, and fraud. You will remain in custody until further review." Milton tried to protest, but the handcuffs clicked before he could finish the sentence. When he looked back at Jack, his eyes no longer held the shine of a public figure, only the glare of a man who had lost control of his world. By evening, news spread statewide. The resort deal was frozen. Every document tied to the land seizure was placed under legal lock. Pine Ridge, for the first time in weeks, breathed without fear of what would burn next. Jack didn't want applause, but the town gave it anyway. Handshakes, nods, quiet thank yous from people who once walked past him without a word. Sarah Collins, her face still marked with faint smoke streaks, approached him outside the hall. "I knew something wasn't right. Didn't know how to prove it." "You did." She smiled, tired but sincere. "You and that dog of yours just saved more than a forest." Jack didn't answer right away. He looked down at Rex, who sat wagging his tail like the chaos of the past days had never touched him. "He's the one who found the truth," Jack said. "I just followed him." The next morning, Jack and Rex returned to the ridge where the fire had started. The forest was wounded, blackened, silent, but not dead. Tiny green shoots were already breaking through the ash, reaching for the sun that finally returned without smoke to dim it. Jack stood still, hands in his pockets, breathing in the cold air. Rex sat beside him, ears forward, tail resting in the dirt. The forest would heal, slowly, stubbornly, like any living thing that refused to be erased. Jack watched the horizon and spoke softly, meant only for Rex and the wind. "Not every fire is nature's doing. Sometimes it's greed dressed as progress. But truth burns hotter than any flame." Rex nudged his hand, as if agreeing. The sun rose above the trees, lighting the first unclouded morning since the fire, and Pine Ridge began again. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't happen in thunder or lightning. They happen quietly, in the moments when truth survives fire, when goodness refuses to step aside, and when one loyal heart, whether human or animal, chooses courage over silence. The forest of Pine Ridge burned, but it did not die. Like our own lives, it reminds us that even after loss, even after darkness, God still writes new beginnings in places we thought were finished. Ashes are not the end. They are the soil where hope is planted. Maybe that is the real message behind this story. Not every fire comes from nature. Some come from greed. But every healing comes from God. And just like Jack and Rex stood against the flames, we too can stand against the fires life sends us. Fear, illness, loneliness, unfairness. Because we are never standing alone. God watches. God restores. God turns burnt ground into growing ground. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, I invite you to do 3 small things. Leave a comment and tell us what part gave you hope. Share this video so more people can remember that light always returns after the smoke. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story of faith, courage, and the beautiful bond between humans and animals. May God bless you, keep you safe, and guide you through every fire you face in life. And may He cover every viewer of this video, yes, including you, with peace, protection, and a new day brighter than the last. God bless you.